heaven forbid if I go do this and it doesn't work and then I go back to corporate. What will people think? That's just a waste of time.
This, mi gente, is Cindy Solomon, who's going to talk to us about what happens when you know what you want to do, but you're worried about what people will think. Welcome back to the Corporate Detox, the podcast where we talk about work, ambition, and life in and after corporate. Because, mi gente, we needed this. It's me, Erilsa, longtime marketing expert and your favorite corporate escape artist. For more than 2 decades, Cindy's been teaching people how to be courageous. Her Courageous Leadership Institute has reached more than 350,000 leaders around the world. Think Google, Oracle, UPS, Wells Fargo, the Gates Foundation. Cindy's TED Talks have been viewed by over 3 million people, which was all interesting to me because I've made plenty of decisions based on what felt safe, easy, or good for my reputation, rather than what I actually knew was right for me. We talk about how to speak up when you're worried about how it's going to look, how to make a career move before you feel ready, how to turn something you're good at into a career, and how to build something when there's no playbook. For Cindy, courage begins here with an unexpected phone call.
And a very famous speaker at the time saw me giving my very last speech for a company that we had been purchased, and it was the last thing I was doing for them. And he quickly identified that I needed to be doing this for a living. Gary Heil, he called me, he had his managing partner call me the very next day after that speech and said, "We want to fly you out to San Francisco so we can talk to you about working with us." And I was like, that's insane. That's crazy. I don't even know what you guys do. What are you talking about? But I chose to say yes. I chose to walk through the door with the understanding that I had no idea what I was doing, no idea what I was talking about. I didn't know what they were talking about. And that's the courage part.
Sit with that moment of Gary Heil when he's like, "I want you to do this for me." Was it an immediate yes? Or where were you when you got that call? Who did you talk to? How did we get there?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought they were nuts. I didn't buy it. I just thought it was some kind of a scam or something. I didn't
Right.
even know what to think about it because I didn't even know there was an industry over here. I had heard of him, but I had never seen him speak before. And I thought, well, okay, there's a million reasons not to do this. And if I say no to it, I will always wonder what could have happened. And my father taught me something very valuable when I was very young. He said that most people think about what's the worst thing that can happen. I always think about what's the best thing that can happen. And that has always stuck with me. I use that in my business consulting all the time for companies. We spend so much time thinking about the downside, so much time thinking about the holes in the plan. If it works, what's the best thing that can happen? I remember I was in my office, in my basement, in my little tiny house way back in the day. I just left my previous company because we'd been purchased. And I sat there, I hung up the phone, and it was an old school phone. I remember that so clearly, an old office phone. I hung up the phone and I sat there and I thought, this is crazy. There's so much risk in this. I don't even know who this guy is. I mean, who knows what's going to happen if I fly out to San Francisco? And I sat there and I could hear my dad's voice in my head. Okay, if you do this and it works, what's the best thing that can happen? And I thought it could change my life. And it did. Yeah.
I will say I've put myself in your shoes, and as somebody who grew very corporate, I'm like, this doesn't sound corporate. Can I trust this? Is this reputational risk for me? And I think
Right.
some of my lack of courage at times is very tied to reputational risk. Do you think that was it for you?
No, I think I'll add a word onto what you just said because I think that's super perceptive. It's the perception of
Oh,
reputational risk,
oh my gosh, I love this. Yeah.
right? Because we're taught that there's a path. And it's
Yep.
certainly for my generation, you did the deal, you got the next title, you got the more money, you got the bigger house, you did the thing, you got the better car. And there was a very specific path. And that's what everybody expected. That's what everybody was working for, even though we had no idea why we were doing that. But
Yeah.
it was a perception that that's the way you do it. And so for me, it was the perception of getting off of that train and believing in my own mind that this was a little bit different back then, but it's much less different now. I talk to people all the time, they're exhausted and they want to take a year off. And they're like, yeah, I'll get another job in a year. It'll be no problem. That's become more normal, if you will, and more accepted. But 20 years ago, you didn't step off the train. If you stepped off the train, you were never getting back on the train. And all of that is false. It was false then, it's false now, but it's that perception.
Oh,
that holds us back all the time. And the perception of what will people think? Heaven forbid if I go do this and it doesn't work and then I go back to corporate. What will people think? And that's just a waste of time.
I'm realizing so much of this thing is perception.
Oh, yeah.
Some people don't even have results, but they have the illusion that they
Ugh,
have results.
ugh. Don't get me started on that.
Right now, you're one of the most sought after speakers. And I think everyone, when you're a speaker, your big thing is, can I get on a TED Talk? When I saw
Right.
your TED Talk, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I mean, how did that opportunity come about?
Well, a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
I think the first way is that I was very fortunate in that somebody saw me speak. They happened to be on the committee. So that first TED Talk, the
Mm,
TEDx that I did in Sonoma, came about because of relationships and connections. And you know how that world works as well, right? The more
yeah.
people you know, the more people who understand what you're doing or what the problems that you're trying to solve out in the world, the more likely you are to get one of those kinds of opportunities. And because of that opportunity, I then started to think long and hard about, okay, if I've been given this first platform on TED, and that was a TEDx, how can I get a bigger platform? What's a problem that everybody wants to solve that I have
Mhm.
expertise in that I could help more people with? And I was the one who pitched to Grown Up TED, as I call it, and the way we work site, my meeting overload TED Talk, and they snapped it up immediately. There wasn't even a second pitch required. They thought it was a great idea. They gave me the resource to do it. And then we were in the studio about 4 weeks after I made the pitch to them to create that TED Talk. And I think that TED Talk has like 3.4 million views at this point.
Crazy. How,
Crazy.
okay, so there's so many things I want to talk about. What was going on behind the scenes there?
It's so funny because I love speaking, and you and I
Yeah.
talked about this before. My happiest place is on a stage. I'm never nervous. My only anxiety is I can't wait to get out there. I'm pushing people aside to try and get on my stage time. And the only time I've ever been nervous, there's been two times in my entire career where I was nervous, and one was for that TED Talk because, you're standing backstage, you look at the big red dot on the stage,
Oh,
you
God.
know this is going to be seen by thousands and thousands of people. And I was the very last speaker in a 12 speaker day. So I got to sit through everybody else, and you get more nervous and more nervous. And I was like, okay, I now understand what it feels like when people are afraid to public speak, because I was actually nervous backstage. And I'm sure you've experienced this too. Backstage is a very odd place. You have speakers who are back there who just want to chat, and that makes them feel more comfortable. You have speakers who are getting in their zone and taking their big deep breaths and doing their rituals. For me, I just very calmly stand back there. I think about, what are the best four things that I can share with this audience in the time that I'm given? And then I'm ready to go the minute they call me out on stage.
I was reading up on somebody who recently did a TED Talk and she's prepared for weeks for it. Got on stage and forgot the whole thing. Had to just go off the cuff. So I liked something you said. What are the four things? Is that your mantra when you go speaking?
Yeah, I think for me, when you're standing up on a stage, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to show up prepared. I'm constantly thinking of new ways of sharing things, different
Right.
ways of telling a story, different points that I want to make. But right before I go on stage, that's my centering piece. That what do I want people to feel? And what do I want them to walk away with? And as long as I go on stage with that, and clarity about those four things. It doesn't matter if I remember what's in the presentation or I did something out of order. As long as I go into it with those four things in place, I'm able to execute on stage as I need to.
But you could never imagine that you'd get 3 million views out of it. How did it feel when it first was out and you were seeing the views climb?
Oh, it was crazy. I remember exactly where I was. I was at another conference. I was sitting over cocktails with some friends of mine, and I realized that they were launching the TED Talk that night. And I
Oh,
thought, well, I'm just going to get on and see if it's on there. And I pull up the site, and I'm looking at the video, and I can see the numbers changing. And within 2 hours, there was 25,000 views, and it was one of those, kind of, they call them core memories, things that you'll never forget. I remember exactly where I was sitting. And for somebody like me, for somebody like you, that's the dream. The
yeah.
dream is, can you get your thinking and your philosophy and your ideas and your helpful thoughts and hints and tips and tricks out to people so that they can do something with it and build a better career, a better life, a better communication style, a better set of skills. That was such a moment for me watching those numbers tick up. It was incredible.
Oh, so incredible. You're wondering what like they care about and how you make the audience feel. Do you think that that was what made this resonate? Is that you thought of
Yeah.
those things?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I first started working on that particular TED Talk, the first question I always ask myself when I'm creating a new keynote or creating a talk is, what do I want people to feel? And
Hmm.
I wanted people to feel in that particular TED, I wanted them to feel, to remember that they were actually in control,
Mm.
that they could actually control their time. They could actually control their actions. They could actually control where they wanted their career to go, should they choose to. And that was the feeling. And if you watch it now, knowing that that's what I was going for, you'll notice that through line in it. And it changed the language I chose. It changed the stories that I told. It changed my tone of voice. It changed how I delivered it, not just what I delivered, but how I delivered it so I could get to that end result.
I think of that piece and that story of how this became your calling when you first realized maybe this can become a thing.
Well, it's so funny thinking about that because I knew long before I started doing it for a living that it was my calling. I just didn't know you could make a living at it. It's kind of one of those things that you love doing this thing, but who's going to pay you to do that? Nobody, right? And that's kind of how I thought about it. I would put myself in situations where I could be the speaker on stage. And in my corporate career, because you and I had talked, I'm a recovering corporate executive. And back in my corporate days, they would have conferences that we had to attend, and they would say, who's willing to go and speak? And nobody would raise their hand. And I was like, I'd love to do that. I love speaking. And because I kept putting myself in situations where I got to do what I loved, I think that's why when somebody saw me, they saw that passion and that feeling that I brought to the stage because I was doing what I love to do. Who doesn't want to be around that? Right? It's like when you meet with somebody and you feel how invested they are and how much they enjoy the work that they're doing. You just want to be a part of it. And that was the gift that I was able to utilize on stage even before I knew there was a possibility to make a living with it. I didn't even know that the industry existed. I'd always spoken for my company. I didn't know we paid speakers. And this was kind of at the infancy of the speaking business too. There weren't a lot of people out there doing it for pay. I just didn't know you could. Gary Heil, because of him putting me on platforms I could have never gotten to as a neophyte speaker, I had this huge speaking business within a year, really.
Sometimes people think, I'm going to do this one thing and then
Yeah.
think that they'll get the opportunities. But for you, you were increasing your luck. Is that, or how would you describe it?
I mean, I think there was a couple of things for me. Number one is I never felt like I had to be perfect. I just had to do it. Nobody else wanted to do it. I'll do
Hmm.
it. That's better than not doing it. So I never put the pressure on myself that I had to wait until I was really good at it. To
Right.
me, it was all practice for getting good at it. So that was the first thing. The second thing is it's increasing your luck because the more ways that you can put yourself out there, I talk to a lot of women and men both, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you do as well, who are thinking about making a change, going into a different industry, going into a different company. And yet they wait around for the perfect opportunity. And
Right.
the reality is, I think for most of us, we we believe there's more risk in movement than there really is. There's more risk in the possibility of failing rather than just going for it, trying it, learning from it, then doing the next thing. And that's why me speaking on every platform that I could do worked for me. I told you this and we were laughing about it when we met. It was completely random. I mean, this speaker had already spoken and he heard me speak. I mean, that's how random it is. Had I not done that presentation, I'm not sure I would even be in this career.
Wow. Oh my God,
Yeah.
Cindy. That like gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. At this point, I was really confused. Why courage? We know it matters at work. 42% of us worry that speaking up at work will get them labeled difficult. The should I actually say what I'm thinking? The is this going to make me look difficult? The maybe I should just keep my mouth shut. But Cindy has been speaking for decades. She loves being on stage, and by her own admission, she's never really nervous. So why did courage become the thing she spent 25 years obsessed about? You bet that's where I wanted to go next. Which is interesting against what you teach to, which is courage, because I don't
Yeah.
think that takes courage for you. I think it comes
Yeah.
very naturally. to you. But I think one of the words you use is that courage felt personal still.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to reconcile these two things. As somebody who does something so naturally, why is courage still important?
Well, so courage, it's, oh my gosh, do you have 8 hours? I could fill
Yeah,
8 hours
we
with
have
that answer. But for me, courage is, we're taught culturally that courage is running into the burning building or thwarting the robbery or, doing a complete, career refresh at
Mhm.
50. But that's not what courage is. Courage is having that fear, that anxiety, that uncertainty about everyday decisions. And we all feel it. We all get that little hit of adrenaline, whether it's like, oh my God, my GPS isn't working and I've got to get to this appointment. And now all of a sudden I don't have my map app anymore. You
Oh
get
my
that
God.
little hit where you're like, oh my God, I don't even know my way out of my own backyard anymore without my phone. You get that little hit of adrenaline. And what that adrenaline is telling you is that you're fearful, you're uncertain, there's stress, there's the unknown. And in that moment, you have a choice to make. In that moment, you can let that adrenaline and that fear and stress and anxiety and uncertainty freeze you. To take the analogy a little further, pull the car over and wait until your satellite comes back. Or you can make the choice to take action in spite of that. I think we've been fed a line about courage that we're supposed to be fearless. And that's just ridiculous. If you're not fearful in the world today, you're just simply not paying enough attention. It's okay to have that fear. It's okay to have the butterflies in your stomach. The real secret is understanding that that's an okay feeling to have, and then making a choice to take action in spite of that fear, stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. I have a good friend who's in the theater world, and she says, the butterflies in your stomach are fine. It's fine to have butterflies. The goal is you have to teach them how to fly in formation. And I think for me, that's what we discount how courageous we all are every day. And it's in that discounting of it that it keeps us from being more courageous.
Many interesting things, but one interesting line stood out. You said you wanted to write a book about courage. This is how it all started, right? But you're described as so many things as a leader: provocative, witty, just somebody who's blazing a path. Why did courage stand to you as important? Why that word?
I think because anytime we do something different, anytime if I choose to drive to the grocery store a different way than I normally go, every time I try to do something a little bit different than how I've always done it and been successful with it, that little tiny action takes courage.
Right.
And and only you can make that decision. That's why we talk so much about courage being entirely personal. It's so easy in the world, especially now, even more so than when I started this work, to find something that works and you just do it forever, right? Rather than realizing that the world only gets better, your team only gets better, the company only gets better, your results only get better, the people around you only get better when you're trying new things every day. And it's in that decision to not just take the path that you know will be successful enough, but your decision to actually do something different to see if you can make it even better. That takes courage, and it takes courage for every individual. That's why, I hate the term in corporate change management. You don't manage change. If you're trying to manage change, you've already lost. That's just ridiculous. There's only leading it or choosing not to lead it. And it's those little everyday decisions that are the most important to making big cultural change. I think imagine if every single one of us decided to take something we already do well and choose to do it a little bit differently today to see if we can get better. Just one thing a day, or two things a day, or three things a day. How much better would our world be? And to me, it doesn't take a huge lift to do that. But it is a lift. It is a courageous act. And it's more courageous when you're already doing something well than it is when things are going south on you. It's a little easier to change when things are going south, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do you know when it hit you that this is the thing, I'm going to follow the thread?
Yeah, it's one of those things that the research for me was testing out what I believed to be true. And testing and interviewing. We've interviewed over 9,000 people now about courage, what it means to them, what it looks like, what does it look like in them, what does it look like in others, what does it look like in the workplace, what does it look like as a leader or an individual contributor. And the way we did that research enabled us to go back and look at some things that were super surprising. And one of them was when we asked people to describe somebody that they thought they was courageous and what they did that made them believe that, it was the tiny decisions, the seemingly smaller decisions. Jane raised her hand in a meeting last week and said that she thought we were going the wrong direction with this product launch. Bill decided that he was going to take a gap year in the middle of his career because he wanted to spend time with his toddler-age children. It was things that weren't life-threatening, but we perceive them to be so much more threatening than they really are. But they were the smaller decisions. They were the sliding door decisions, saying yes to the opportunity, saying no to the opportunity, asking for what you want, being willing to take a sideways move in order to get to a higher level that you really want. So they were the smaller decisions, and it came through so clearly in the research.
How was that research set up? Did you have a questionnaire that you had everyone take, or was it informal?
It was formal, but it was all interview based, because this is back, you have to think back to 20 to 25 years ago before we had the kind of tools. I mean, oh my kingdom for, Survey Monkey to redo all that research, right? But, we weren't able to do it any other way than live interviews. And we would cold call people. We would cold call billionaire entrepreneurs. We would cold call mid-level managers. We would get friend of a friend referrals so that we could get this great cross-section of industry, of level, of functional areas, of ages, of backgrounds. And it was such a journey. And it was hour-long in-person interviews that we would type the transcripts to as we were talking and collect the data on a static set of questions. And that's what it was so stunning within 6 months of us starting this, because as you can imagine, it took a ton of time to get through all these, make the connections, set up the time, do all the things. And within 6 months, we knew the key findings already. There was only a couple that were super surprising. And one of those was the courage was in the smaller daily actions. The other thing that I believe to be true and that proved out is there's this great quote by Ruth Gordon that says, like any other muscle, it strengthens with use. I was convinced that if we could teach people that every day they were making courageous decisions, once they started to understand that and feel it, they would start to build that muscle and be able to be courageous against bigger and bigger things for themselves. And that was absolutely true.
I would have thought in my head you would have chosen corporate people and then asked them about courage, but it seemed like you were really trying to form a thesis at large, the human experience.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I haven't thought about this in a long time, but it really did start out as it wasn't going to be a business thing. I wanted to write a book about courage because I believe that in order for you to get what you want out of your life, there's systems and things that hold you back. But I also think we control more of that than we think we do by our actions. And so when the research started, it just happened that Meg Birds and I, the gal that did the initial research with me, we just knew more corporate people because we were in the corporate world, right? And so that's who we started to collect to interview. But our original idea was to just write it for people kind of at large. And then we started to talk to all these corporate folks, and we realized that the thing that's common in all corporations are the people. People are people. And if we can help people see their courage, believe in their courage, create muscle memory around their courage, then it will play out into teams, companies, communities, the world. But that was a secondary finding. It was not the finding that we really went after originally. Then we started to see, once we got to that point, we started to say, okay, well, how do we teach people to be more courageous? And that's where we really did focus on people within organizations, because we could get to more of them faster. That's when it really turned the corner. We realized that courage can be learned. You just have to choose to go after it like any other skill in your leadership toolkit.
There's something about this part of Cindy's story that feels very familiar to me. You start with one thing because you're curious about it. You get good at it. People start responding to it. And then at some point you realize, oh, this might actually be something. That moment can be exciting, but it can also be really, really uncomfortable, because now you have to decide whether you're actually going to follow the idea or just keep going at what you already know how to do. Cindy had started this research because she wanted to write a book about courage. She had no idea she was building the foundation for an entire company. And you'll see just how wild it is building something where there's no playbook. I'm so curious about, there's so many ways that you could have taken that concept. You could have just stopped at the book, taken the book and spoken, done speaking gigs and kept it at that. But you seem to have taken it, you've created an institute, you have trainings, you have workshops, you have facilitators. It is this robust machine. What did you consider as this idea was taking shape?
Well, what do I want people to feel?
Yeah.
And what do I want to feel? And I want to feel like I get this information to the biggest amount of people I possibly can, so that they can do something with it, so that they can make a better career for themselves, a better life for themselves. They can find the thing that they love as much as I love speaking and doing the work that I do. I needed to find a way to get it out to as many people as I possibly can and teach them how to do it. It wasn't enough to, I only spoke about it for, I don't know, 7 to 10 years. And I had a little part-time admin and, I would do the speaking gigs and run around the world talking about this. But people kept coming to me and saying, "Can you teach our leaders how to do this?" And I had to make the decision. That was another one of the scary, courageous moments for me, because I had a pretty cushy life just doing the speaking. It was super fun. And I'd never built a business. I'd never built a company. I didn't know how to be a training and leadership development company. I had to make the choice that if I want to get this out to as many people as possible and teach them actually how to do it, I have to build a machine that does that, because I have to clone myself and get the content out there in a way that arms people with a process to help them build their courage in their work. And I realized that was what I wanted to do. I had no idea how to do it, but I wasn't looking for the perfect way to do it. I was just looking for the next step that would help me get closer to doing it. And one step at a time, that's how I built the company.
At first, it must have been scary to clone yourself.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you decide to clone yourself, were you scared straight? Like, there's no way that I'm going to maintain the quality of it?
Well, I originally thought it'd be easy. I'm going to teach some people how to train it and off they go. Because of course I trust everybody. That's one of my,
Yeah. Yeah.
what is it? Our greatest strength always becomes our greatest weakness, right? I trust everybody. And I was using people that I knew and that I'd worked with before. I realized, all of this, it sounds so easy when we do this in a, 45-minute podcast. It was like, oh, my path was so simple. It was not. I made thousands of mistakes. Nobody builds anything without making a whole ton of mistakes. So just be prepared for that, right? Nobody has a career without a ton of mistakes. Nobody parents without mistakes. We're all making mistakes all over the place. We just need to get comfortable with that. It's just what you do after you make the mistake, right? And it became quickly clear to me that I had to find a process that taught my facilitators the content. I had to find the right people with the right values. I had to have the correct legal paperwork to make sure we were all on the same page together. I had to be super crystal clear about my expectations. I had to create content that was modular, that I could teach people they felt comfortable with. They had to love it. They had to believe in it. And then that's what enabled me to control the outcome. Because when you clone yourself, there is a high risk of people going out there and misrepresenting the content, doing damage with the content. And I think if you look at some of my peers in the business who have gone out with, certifications that are a couple of hours long, and then people are training their content, it's terrifying to me, because you have no control over that. And whether people mean to or not, they can do some real damage with that. They put your name behind a product that really isn't you. I had to make some pretty big mistakes along the way and get burned a couple of times to find the process that allowed me to control that delivery. And, that's why we only have 40 facilitators. I don't have 40,000 facilitators, because I want to make sure that whatever I deliver to the client is as if they're hearing it from me. And and the content's used for good and not evil.
How were you learning the steps? Were you talking to your peers? Were you building this on the fly?
I was doing two things. One is there weren't a lot of people in my business at the time doing this. So the 3 or 4 folks, and they were very generous with their time, they were doing it differently, because they were doing it more with like product, them in a box, versus live trainings and facilitators going out. So I asked for help. I asked for feedback. Everybody was super kind and generous to me. I never had anybody turn me down. And that's another thing I'd recommend, is you've got to have the courage to ask for help, because people are generally more than willing to help, but you got to ask them. I made a lot of mistakes. I would start slow. I would hire one facilitator, see how that went, and learn from that. You got to have a contract. You got to set specific things. You've got to, have an NDA in there. So then I was on my second facilitator. And so I got a little bit better at it. And then by my fifth facilitator, I was starting to see the trends of here are the values that I need in a facilitator. Here's how I get better at training it. Here's how I get better at certifying them and, going out every 6 months and making sure that they're still, because human nature, through no fault of anybody's, you kind of make the content your own the more you do it. So I would do drop-ins and go out and see people deliver it and make sure it was still online with what we had certified them in. So it was trial and error. It was asking for help, getting the help up front that I needed. And it was trial and error. Every time I got into trouble or had something go wrong, okay, what do I need to put in the process to do it better next time? And I stopped thinking about growing my business like a right answer, wrong answer thing. It was just the next answer. Next time I'll be better at this, and then apply it. And the next time I got better, and I'm still doing it 25 years in. We just are putting a new class of facilitators through, and we're doing it differently than we did last year because every single year we get better at it. Yeah. So yeah, it's just realizing that it's just trial and error because you're doing it for the first time.
A lot of what you're saying also is because you were one of the first ones to do it. It's like there is no playbook.
So, and it's trial and error, right? Yeah. I could have scaled to be a much larger business had I figured out how to put courageous leadership in a box. And I tried a couple of different avenues. Frankly, as I really look back on it in light of our conversation today, my passion is in the live delivery. That's where you can see people change, you see people transform, you see the light bulb go off in their minds. And I could have built a bigger business by doing, Cindy in a box or courageous leadership in a box. And I tried a couple of different avenues with it, but I was never passionate about it. Now, should I have hired somebody who was passionate about it, who did it for me? Yes, that was probably a failing on my part, but it just wasn't something I was interested in. And could my business be 3 times the size it is now? Absolutely. Do I want it to be? Do I need it to be? No. I'm still doing what I'm passionate about. I'm still, I'm 63 years old and I love it as much today as I did 25 years ago. And I'm making the same difference. I'm probably making a much better difference for people because I've gotten committed to getting better and better and better. And I couldn't build a personal brand today the same way I did it 25 years ago. It's a whole different ballgame now. I have to hire people now to help me keep my personal brand what it is in today's world. But it still is about, it's got to be about something that you love, that you're passionate about, that you can't wait to talk to people about, that you light up and it brings you energy to do it. And if you get that part right, the rest is just tactics. The rest is just technology and tactics. That's it. And that's where you guys have a leg up on where I started from, because you have the ability to reach so many more people. But the only way it works is if you reach them with the message that you care deeply, deeply about.
Talking about that message you care deeply about, what is the one thing you think people misunderstand about courage?
They think it's the big stuff. They think it's changing the whole company's structure. It's doing, changing a whole product line. It's not. It's how you create a courageous culture is people get nervous about raising their hands in a meeting and disagreeing, but they do it anyway. It's people feel valued and heard, and so they're more willing to share the unpopular opinion. It's the everyday things of, we're getting ready to change our internal communication process in the company, and I'm terrified. I'm I just figured out how to do this one over here. What do you mean we're changing it to this one over here? And I know it's going to be better for the business. And I don't want to do it, but I trust the people around me. I will work through my fear and anxiety and stress and uncertainty about it because people I trust and respect are telling me it's the right thing to do for the business. And so I close my eyes and I jump and I go with them. Those are the courageous moments. That's the misperception about courage, is it's a big thing that you either have or don't, rather than the little everyday things, and that it grows with exercise. The more you fight that, the more you take action in spite of that fear, the more courageous you become.
You used the word trust there. Do you think that courage requires some trust?
Well, I think it's the opposite of what you just said. I think that trust requires courage. Because you have to trust somebody, which means you're not in control of it. And so the trusting somebody actually requires courage. The more you let go, we teach this in our leadership classes all the time, the more you can let people take the wheel, the more you can let them fail a little to learn, the more that they will trust you and you will trust them. And that all takes courage. But the other side of that question is I have to just close my eyes and jump with them because I do trust them. I do believe that they have the best interests of the company at heart and they know more about it than I do. So I need to just close my eyes and go.
That's a big one for people to close my eyes. For somebody who's starting today, who's on the 0 scale of courage, what's a tiny act that they can do to start becoming courageous?
Well, no one is on the 0 end of the scale. Okay. Anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, they have already had a courageous act today because they chose to use their time to listen to something that might give them a different perspective, that might help them get better at something, that might challenge their thinking. So everybody who's listening to this is already courageous. They've already done a courageous thing just now by choosing to listen to this podcast. And everybody is courageous. 100% of us make courageous decisions every single day. You just have to realize that. And that's what starts building that courage muscle. The first act that you can take to believe that is say to yourself, I am courageous. And I am choosing to build my courage skill. That's the first thing they can do.
Affirmation. So I am courageous.
I mean, I think if you've got kids and you got them out of the house today and nobody died, courageous act. You got on the plane when you didn't think you were going to get there, courageous act. You raised your hand in a meeting, courageous act. You had a difficult conversation with somebody, courageous act. You had a difficult conversation with your spouse or your kid, courageous act. We all are taking courageous actions all day long, every day, but we don't sit with them and see them. That's what we need to start doing. Because unless you know, it's like lifting weights. Unless I know what weight that is, I won't know if I can do it or not. If I know I've successfully lifted a 5-pound weight for a while, I can go to an 8-pound, to a 10-pound. But I have to give myself credit for the work that I've already done.
Okay, well, I love that. Well, you gave me hope that there was something else.
And not only that, but also I gained from talking to you because you give me hope for the future.
I gave you hope for the future. I showed courage. What do you think about this younger generation? What excites you for the future on courage?
Well, it's you. It's you having this great corporate job, could have stayed in it forever, could have gotten on the hamster wheel, continued down. And when I talked to you about this podcast, you cold called me. Yep. Didn't have any idea who you were. I was like, okay, well, that takes courage. So you got my interest, right? And you figured out how to meet with me. You pursued it. You were not going to take no for an answer. I loved it, but in such a kind of respectful way. And when you talk about the work that you're doing now, you light up. Yeah. And you're getting there so much earlier than I ever did. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody prior to Gen X, you guys are so much more courageous than we are. And the thing I worry about is not letting the system grind that courage out of you, not getting hung up in what people think, what should be done, what they want you to do, what you're supposed to be doing, what it's going to look like to people, how many likes you get, how many downloads you get. I don't want people to get hung up in that because the most courageous thing you can do for your life and your family and your world and your friends is find the thing that's your true calling. Find the thing that you love and that you're passionate about. And it might not be one thing. It might be one thing today and then it turns into something else and then it turns into something else. What is the phrase that what does the universe do when you make a plan? It laughs, right? Mm-hmm. And there is no plan to any of this. We're all in the same boat. We're all struggling through all this. And the people who are willing to be courageous and pursue the thing that they love, that's what gives me hope.
All the girls saying, I needed this, clearly same. And I don't think the takeaway is be more courageous. It's probably more annoying than that. You're going to be scared. You're not going to know what you're doing. And you're probably going to make a few mistakes along the way. And you might just have to do it anyway. Hasta la próxima.
Remember exactly where I was sitting, what cocktail I had in my hand, who was sitting around the table with.
What cocktail was it?
It's a martini, of course.
Oh,
Come on.
Love it.
You've met me. You should have known.
We are the same person, Cindy. I'm kind of scared a little bit.